This is a addition to the Cold War simulation directions with emphasis on the role of the United Nations and how that is going to work. So we already get the basics. Hopefully you watched the first screencast where we have the various groups, the teacher and the accountant. So again, during the round, what you need to do is sign treaties and you need to get your health and food cards. So again, the diplomat is going to groups, negotiating to get a treaty agreement with the president, then returning back to their group to get their president to sign. Secretary of State then takes the treaty, drops it off to the accountant, and then the accountant will pay, during or at the end of the round for that particular treaty. We also know that within a group, people are allowed to go to the teacher to buy weapons and get treaties and, rule changes, and just certain tasks that they're trying to accomplish approved or not. So that's kind of where we're at with this. We haven't really said anything about the United Nations at this point. So at the end of the round, what's going to happen is the accountants are going to start discarding those treaties and then replacing those treaties with actual money. They are also going to verify that a health card is in place for each group as well as a food card. If they do not have a health or food card, a group will sit out in the next round. This will also lead to what is called a humanitarian crisis, which is where the role of the United Nations president comes in. So here is the UN president, who pretty much during the round can also go to groups to try to get things passed. But for the most part, this individual has to live up to the United Nations Charter. So for every time keep in mind there might be two grades here. I'm going to be grading the UN president on how well they live up to this charter. So what exactly does that mean? Well, they're trying to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from treaties, promote social progress. So if a group doesn't have health or food, this creates yet a humanitarian crisis. And the United Nations president needs to figure out a way to try to resolve that. There are numerous things that can be done. I'm not going to say anything, but let's just say at the end of round one, there are two groups that have don't have a health and a food card. We will then go to this score chart, and the president of the UN will be asked to come up with a solution. So they would put, resolution 6, food issue. And then they have to get the United Nations to vote. If it's an outcome, let's say it's passed or not passed, that then will be an issue for the class as well as for the president. Keep in mind, for the UN president, as long as they're trying to pass resolutions, I really don't care if the class decides not to pass the resolution. So I'm pretty much going to be looking at the UN president, how they're living up to the charter, but I'm also scoring the class to see whether or not the class is living up to the UN charter. So if your class is going to war and the UN president is trying to prevent war, that's going to be a positive for the UN president and a negative for the class overall. So I will be looking at different scores. It's difficult to kind of address because I don't want to take up I want classes to kind of figure this out, but I also, want to give you the flexibility to come up with things on your own. So the more I give examples, then the more likely it is that, classes might possibly try to do those things without, thinking about the information kind of on their own. So let's just say a class decides to use nuclear weapons. This is a violation of United Nations. Here you see their treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. If a class decides to implement genocide, I'm going to say you're not living up to the charter. If your class goes to war, basically anything that is working against the preamble of the United Nations is going to be an issue for the president. So as I said, at the end of every round, the United Nations president can try to pass resolutions. So how exactly are we going to vote? Well, we're going to vote using a general council and a security council. So keep that in mind. You want to take a look at the slideshow on the Cold War simulation to try to get more information. But as we see in this particular graphic right here, whatever they're voting on, Alpha Bravo Charlie are considered Security Council members, which means they are permanently members of the Security Council and they have veto power. So in this graphic here, we see that Delta and Echo are also in the Security Council, but they are there rotating. Keep in mind, these individuals are permanent, these individuals are rotating. So one of the first things your group or your UN president needs to figure out is how are groups going to be members of the Security Council? You look, in round one, you can easily vote to disband the Security Council. That's totally allowed. You would then have to have these individuals vote to decide to do that. That would be fine. Let's just say that Foxtrot wants to get something passed. Well, they're kind of at the mercy of the Security Council. They want to make sure that they get all of these groups involved on their side. So during the round, you also want to be able to kind of broker and get, groups on your side. You also have rotating, which basically means that, as I said, these individuals are there, but they're not permanent. So your class also wants to figure out, like, how do we rotate Foxtrot and Golf into the Security Council? Is it going to be for 1 round, 2 rounds? Is Delta going to permanently be there? Is Echo going to permanently be there? And we're just going to forget. If your class decides to do that, then I will say that your class is not following the United Nations Charter. So I'll constantly be referring back to this particular language here. But for the most part, the UN president is responsible for trying to pass resolutions based on what's happening in the class using the United Nations Charter. And then I'll be scoring the class separately. So let's just say we are voting on a resolution. We already have an idea of how that works. Each member is going to get a vote. So we already know that these 3 are in the Security Council. And let's just say this individual, they're rotating right here. These folks are rotating. So let's just say that Foxtrot is trying to pass a resolution. They would then give their resolution idea to the UN president. Then the UN president would present this to the class. Foxtrot's resolution 4 is this, this, and this. Then they would vote on it. You want to keep in mind, like, how are we going to vote? Do we want to vote in secret? Do we want to vote in public? Think about the consequences about that. And then you just vote. And let's just say everybody agrees, yet Charlie wants to veto it. If Charlie vetoes the resolution, now that resolution just doesn't get passed, you're going to have to figure out a way to satisfy Charlie to get Charlie to vote for the resolution. I don't care what the resolution is. It's up to your class. Every class plays this differently. You'll see as things get crazy, as groups start to do certain things, that are aligned with these particular rules here.